Hello and welcome to chapter 8 of our web development course using HTML and CSS. In chapter 8 we are going to talk about what? Extra markup. Okay, extra markup. These are some different elements, okay, that are used in enhancing our website functionality. Okay, we talk about the doctype. We explain comment, okay, how to comment on your website. Okay, HTML has a lot of different versions. There have been different versions of the same technology over the years. Each of them also has the way it communicates with the browser to render it. So in this particular video, I'm going to show you the various versions and how you declare the doctype. The doctype is very important because it tells the browser how or which version of HTML is being used. Not all the browsers are able to display the current versions of HTML. Okay, so it is important just at the beginning of your HTML code or program, you declare which version, okay, which version of HTML you are using. It doesn't mean when you don't declare it wouldn't work. As you can see from chapter 1 right up to chapter 7 that we've done, we haven't declared the doctype, okay, but our codes were running smoothly. We are going to declare it now. I will show you how to declare and the various versions and how it declares the doctype. So let me go to my MS Word. The very top one, which is HTML5, which is what we are using, this is how it declares the doctype. It says doctype HTML. So this sits on top of the main HTML element, okay, just to tell the browser we are using HTML5. Even without you declaring it, your code will still run perfectly. It is a very good practice to bring. Now the previous versions of HTML, like HTML4, this is how it also declares the doctype, and this doctype, like I said, sits on top of the main HTML element. This is transitional XHTML. As HTML4 came, different additional functionality was added, and then it was named XML. So later there was a consensus that the XML, which is a different markup structure, and the HTML should be merged together. So it was merged, and this was the new name, XHTML. When you're using XHTML, this is how you declare the doctype, okay, and then strict XHTML, that is it, and then XML, that is how you declare the doctype, and the doctype sits on top of the main HTML element. Let's copy this. Let's copy this. This is what we are actually using, HTML5. We have copied, Control S to copy. Let me go to my code. So this is where you insert your document declaration, okay, on top here. So you see the doctype, exclamation sign, doctype, and then HTML. Before you bring your HTML, this will not do any physical change in your code, but it just tells the browser how to render this particular index.html file we are creating. So it is for you to tell the browser how it should what render it. And then you are, because you are using HTML5, it should show, okay, if you are using the latest browsers, it should show almost every other thing that can be shown by HTML5. Okay, so that is just that about the declaration. Now the next thing we are going to talk about is not an element, but it's a comment. So there are comments in HTML. Now it is important to also write comments in your code because it helps in explaining the code for either yourself or for someone else. When you have a big website, a very large website that has what multiple lines of code, even though you are the original author of the code, when you write in comment, it helps you to actually understand or remember the codes easier. Okay, let me give you an example. Now you start a code by putting in your comment between this. So by bringing a left angle bracket, exclamation mark, and then 2 dashes, and then end with 2 dashes with what? Right angle bracket. Everything between this should be in the middle. So for instance, I've commented Ghana independence as what? All these ones are comment. Comments are not expected to show on the browser. So when you comment, it doesn't show on the browser. Just that these other things are shown on the browser. However, when you view the page source of the page, you are going to see the comment, but the browser doesn't render it, okay, as part of the things to display. Now for instance, let me just save this. Let me refresh my browser. Okay, so you can see my H1, which is Ghana, my independence, which is H2. Okay, you can see Ghana is a country, the first paragraph. You can see the second paragraph. We are without seeing these codes. These comments are what I've written here. So if you check, you can see start of introduction. So you can write this one to remind you of what Ghana is or what independence is. Okay, and you can write this, okay, to also start to indicate that the particular text you are writing here is part of the main text. When you end it, you indicate that this is the end of the main text, so that you actually you follow whatever you are doing traditionally. Okay, by commenting them, it is easier for you to understand, or when someone else takes up your work and he wants to continue from where you stopped, the person can easily understand the code. Let's view it one more time. You realize that the comments are not showing here, but I said when you view the page source, you are going to see the comment. How do you view the page source? Okay, page source simply means the codes that gave you this particular nice looking interface or nice looking web page. Okay, what is the page source? What is the actual code that gave you this? What you do is you right click. Okay, you right click on the web page, empty space on the web page, or you click on what? View page source. Now this is our page source. These are the codes that give us this particular web page, but in the source code you can see the comment. Okay, but you cannot see the comment on your main web page. Viewing page source of other websites gives you an idea or helps you in also designing your web pages. Okay, so if you want to find any idea, or if you see any particular thing on a particular web page, you want to see how it was written, how the code was written, you can right click and view the page source. Now let's talk about the ID attribute. As you can see in my code, I have given a paragraph an attribute of ID. I'm going to explain what the ID attribute means and when it can be used. ID attribute. every element, okay, can carry the ID attribute. It is used to uniquely what? It's used to identify a particular element from other elements on the page. So even if all the elements are paragraph elements, let's say there are 4 different paragraphs on a particular web page, you can use the ID element to uniquely identify each of the paragraphs. Unlike headings where we have H1, H2, H3, in paragraphs they all have the what? The P element. But you can use the ID attribute within the what? Within the paragraph, okay, or within the opening tag to identify or differentiate between each of the what? Of the paragraphs, okay. Each value should start with a letter or an underscore. That means you cannot use a number or a special character other than underscore to what? To give a value to the what? To the ID. It is important that no 2 elements on the same page have the same value for their ID. So if you want to separate, let's say, the first paragraph from the second paragraph, you have given the first paragraph an ID of come, don't give the same ID value to the second paragraph. If you do that, that means there is no what? They are no longer unique. When we are using the ID attribute, we want to uniquely what? Identify each and every what? Element from the other. Giving an element a unique identity allows you to style it differently than any other instance of the same element on the page. For example, you might want to assign one paragraph within the page a different style than all of the other paragraphs. So like I was saying, you have 2 or 3 paragraphs. You want to make the font of the first paragraph red, or you want to color it, give a font color of red to all the text in the first paragraph. If you do this, if you give it a unique identity, it makes it easier for you to actually give a particular style or a particular format to how you want your paragraph to appear. Otherwise, if you want to style your paragraph, it will affect all other paragraphs. The style will be the same for all other paragraphs. But the ID, okay, ID is a global attribute because it can be used on any element to make it unique, different from others. Let's talk about the class attribute, okay. Every HTML also can carry a class attribute. Sometimes, rather than uniquely identifying one element within a document, you will want a way to identify several elements as being different from other elements on the page. For example, you might have some paragraphs of text that contain information that is more important than others and want to distinguish these elements that contain this information. Or you may want to differentiate between links that point to other pages on your website and link that points to an external site somewhere. How do you do the class attribute? The value, okay, of the class attribute should describe the class it belongs to. In the example, I will show you the example. Key paragraphs have a class attribute whose value is very, very what? Important. The class attribute on any element can share the same value. Okay, so in the example which I'm going to show you, the value of important, which is the name of our class, could be used on headings and links. But by default, using what? Class attribute does not affect the presentation of an element. It will only change the appearance if there is CSS rule that indicates what you should it should display or how it should display it. The ID and then the class most of the time is clear when we are doing CSS. We'll get to CSS soon and you understand it better. If you would like to indicate that an element belongs to several classes, you can what? Separate class names with a space. So unlike uniquely identifying one particular thing, in using class you can group, okay, group some paragraphs or some text that contain a certain information as one. That is the way you can distinguish between elements. So those information could be on several elements, okay, could be at the header, it could be in paragraph, but you want to what? Put them together and style them together. So it's easier when you use class attributes. In this example, using class attributes, you can give the same value for the class to several elements. As you can see here, this paragraph has a value of what? Importance for the class, and you can also see it here for admittance. So you can group all this, okay, all this particular information you have here as important and all this information as important, but style it differently. Okay, you can give it the same value but you can style it differently. You can decide to make all these ones uppercase, and then you can decide to do all this one be colored yellow or be colored white or be colored blue on your web page. So that's for class attributes. Block element. When we say block element always appear to start on a new line. We've given a lot of examples of what? Block elements. They start on a new line. Okay, an example include the heading, the paragraph, the unordered list, and then the list. Every element you see here, okay, within this particular bracket, anytime you introduce them, start on a new line. Let's see some of the examples we have used. Now, anywhere you use paragraph is a block element, okay, and then heading. Let me check out the heading. The heading also starts on the new line. So let's check on our home page to see. If you check on the home page, you realize that this is H1, it's on a new line. This H2 on a new line. This, I'm sure this is another heading of H2, and these are paragraph, individual paragraphs. Even if the space or the margin is not occupied, anytime you use another paragraph element under this particular paragraph, it is going to start on a new line. So that's what we call block elements. Now, after block element, let's talk about inline element. Inline elements, okay, also appear to continue on the same line as their neighboring elements. Okay, examples of inline elements which we have used already is the anchor. Okay, the anchor, the bold, the emphasis, and the image. That means you can put an anchor in line of the element. It doesn't start on a new line, so it's not a block letter. If you want an anchor or a letter a word you are trying to bold, or a sentence you are trying to bold, come on a new line, you are either supposed to put this anchor or this bold or this emphasis in a paragraph. So you bring a paragraph and then you bring the anchor. In this case, the paragraph is going to what? House the anchor. Other than that, anchor, bold, emphasis, or image does not come to the next line. It continues on the same line as we have used in the previous chapters of this course. Now, grouping text and elements in a block. Grouping text and elements in a block. Now you want to put some elements, okay? It could be paragraph, it could be image, it could be headings, but you want to put a group of them, more than one of them, in one particular container. So that's what we call a div. Okay, so the div element allows you to group a set of elements together in one block level box. For example, you might create a div element to contain all of the elements for the header of your website. That means the logo, the navigation, or you might create a div element to contain comments from visitors. So it will put all of them in one box of what? Div. The div box can be used to group any element together, and the div element also will start on a new line. So in other words, it is what? It is a block element as well. Okay, you can also give a div element an attribute of id or class. When you do this thing, you want to what? You can also create css style rules to indicate how much space a div box should what occupy on the screen, and change the appearance of all the elements contained within it. So instead of doing paragraphs and then giving them id elements, you can decide to what? Put all your paragraphs that you want, okay, in a div, and give a div either an id, then style that particular div in css. So when you start only the div, it is going to affect the div and all other elements it contains. Now let's see the div in action. I have grouped a certain group of elements together in a div. Okay, so this is the beginning of my div. This is the opening tag, and I've given it an id of what? Header. I've placed all my header information, including my banner, okay, and some list of what? Some links, okay, in the div. So the div ends here. This is an unordered list, and these are my list items. All these elements have been put together, including an image, into what? Into an element called div. And I can style this div. Anytime I start this div in css, it applies to all these other elements within the div. Let me save this. Okay, so you can see the banner shows here, and you can see the individual links I have done. Okay, all these lists, I've put them together in one particular div. So from this place, it's like all of them have become one single element. I've grouped them together to become one single element, and I can style them together. That is the use of div. And div also, I've told you, is a block element, so it starts on a new line. Now we have explained how to group text and element in a block. Let's talk about how to group text and element in what? In an inline form. So we use what? Span. The span element acts like an inline equivalent of the div. So the div is a block element, but the span is what? It's an inline element, which means that it can contain a section of text where there are no other suitable elements to differentiate it from its surrounding text. I'll give you an example and I'm going to explain it. Second, the span also can what? Contain a number of inline elements within it. The most common reason why people use span, okay, is so that they can control the appearance of the content of this element using what? CSS. So we have a lot to explain in CSS. Also, you will see that a class or an id attribute is used with span. One, to explain the purpose of this span, make it clearer to you and others. In the span, you can either include what? A class attribute or an id attribute, so that CSS styles can be what? Applied to elements that have specific values for these attributes. So as you can see in the example here, this is span, and span is grouping of what? Is grouping element and text inline. It has an attribute of what? Class and the value artist. This allows us to what? To style this particular text within this span, or the group of elements within this span, with the same style in CSS. in CSS. When you get to CSS, you are going to understand all these elements and how it works properly. I do not want to mix them up and introduce CSS whilst we are doing HTML. When we are done with HTML proper, you enter into CSS. Then you know how to what? How to apply styles to what? To all the elements. What are iframes? Iframes simply means inline frames. Okay, and it is a little window that has been cut into your page. Okay, and in this window it's like you are seeing another page on your page. Okay, one common use of iframe is the use of Google Map on pages. The Google Map is embedded onto your web page, and the content of this iframe can be seen on any HTML page, whether it is on your local device or it is when it is hosted elsewhere. An iframe is created by using what? Iframes elements. However, there are some attributes that can what? That iframe also what? Contains. Let's go through the attributes. After the attributes, I'll give an example of how to embed Google Map and how to use iframes. Okay. First of all, an iframe will have a source, that is iframes src. That is one of the attribute it gets. The src attribute specifies the URL of the page. We have used src, okay, when we were doing images. We have used src when we were linking our web page to another what? Web page, either on the same website or on a different website. The iframe also will have an attribute of height, just to specify the height of the iframe in pixels. It's also what? Contains the width. Okay, the width of the attribute also will determine the width of the iframe in pixels, because it is important. You bringing another page onto your page, it's important to what? Give these dimensions and clearly state them out. Okay, so let's quickly go onto our text editor. We will put in some iframe code, and then we are going to what? See the way it will appear on our web page. Now, as you can see, as I've embedded the Google Maps on the web page. So let me show you the attribute I was talking about. You can see the width attribute and then the height attribute also present, and this is the source attribute. So the source attribute is actually the website that is hosting the map. You can easily go to Google Maps. So let me just see Melcom Plus, Alisa Hotel. Let me use the one Accra. Just open any location. Let's say Parkview. Okay, you can click on share, and then you choose embed a map. Okay, you can copy this link and then go to your code editor and then paste it. Okay, all right. Now, information about your pages. Remember when we were doing the head, I told you the head also contains other meta information. Okay, so the meta element lives inside the head. Okay, so the head becomes, let's say, a parent element which houses the meta and then the title and other information. So the meta is found inside the head and contains information about the web page. It is not visible to the users. Okay, it doesn't come in the body, and it is not also visible in the title bar, as we explained that things in the head are displayed in the title bar. It is not displayed in the title bar, but it contains information. It tells the search engines what to do. Okay, who created it, whether or not the page is time sensitive. Okay, the meta element is an empty element, so it does not what have a closing tag, so we don't have an opening meta and a closing meta with a forward slash. It can also contain attributes, okay, that carry the information. The most common attribute that can be found is name and content attribute, which tend to what to be used together. The description can also be found, okay, can also be embedded in the meta. Description contains a description of the page. The description is commonly used by search engine to understand what page is about and should be what a maximum of 155 characters. Sometimes it is also displayed in search engine results. Keywords is also what contained in the what in the meta and gives information about your page. This keyword is a list of comma separated words that a user might search onto to find your page. What about robots? This indicates whether search engines should add this page to their search results or not. A value of no index can be used if this page should not be added, and a value of no follow can be used if search engines should add this page in their results, but not any pages that links to rate. The author is also part of the information that is displayed in the meta. Okay, it shows you the author of the web page. Pragma also prevent the browser from catching the page, that is storing it locally to save time downloading on subsequent visit. I'll give you an example of the meta information, and you are going to see all these other pieces of information that comes together to tell the search engine what to do, even though it is not displayed. Now, expires. Because browsers often catch the content of a page, the expires option can be used to indicate when the page should expire. Note that the date must be specified in a particular format. Okay, so you can see from my meta information, there's a description, okay, and it says an essay on installing art. Some of the keywords include installation, art, opinion. Like we explained that the keywords are separated by comma. So each word is separated by comma. And then for robot we say no follow. We have no index and no follow. No follow simply means it should it should include it in the search engine. The author, it says John Duckett. Okay, so let me just change the author. And do it Sewuni. Okay, and you can see other information like the pragma, okay, like the catch and then the expires. And I told you the expire should be in a particular format which has been specified. So you can see the day, the date, the month, and then the year follows. Okay, the year follows, and then time it should expire. So you have the name, the content, the keywords have been explained here, the description has been explained here, robots has been explained, author to explained, pragma explained, expires explained, as we've gone through the PowerPoint presentation. Now this brings us to the end of chapter 8, which is extra markup, where we looked at a lot of elements that do not actually put or change the structure, but goes a long way in making your website communicate with search engines and browsers. Okay, the next chapter, which is chapter 9, is going to be the very last chapter we are going to have in HTML. Then we'll move to chapter 10, which is the beginning of CSS. Chapter 9 is going to be how to add audio, video, and then flash files onto our web page. See you, and then thank you for taking part in this particular lesson.